Hello, everyone. Today is Tuesday, April 3rd, 2018, and this is the weekly Sig Docs meeting for Kubernetes. Kubernetes straight to video. We have a super full agenda today, so I may be more of a moderator than usual for time. Apologies in advance if I have to interrupt a super awesome conversation, just to keep us on track. So let us start with what we always do and ask if there are any new contributors, folks who are here in this meeting for the first time. If you are new or this is your first time, wave, raise your hand, say hi. Marcus, hello.
Hi, that would be me, I guess. So I've been asking the question in the channel last week about the missing full API group names. That's basically why I'm here. I tried to open the agenda document, but unfortunately I don't have permissions.
Oh no.
So it looks like the document is not public.
If you will drop an email, let's see, if you will, who's the best person?
Marcus, if you just chat me your email address in the chat, I'll add you to the document.
Okay, sure.
It's open to everybody in the Sig Docs group, so
okay.
You probably don't want every email from the Sig Docs group.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Right. So just some quick updates. We are we had originally scheduled to meet last week with the contractor who's migrating the website from Jekyll to Hugo. That was postponed 1 week. That meeting is now tomorrow. So we don't have any updates on the Hugo migration yet, but that meeting has been rescheduled for tomorrow. So we'll have more information about the Hugo migration next week. Let's see, the meeting to talk about our master branch strategy is today at 1 p.m. Pacific. So if you are interested in attending that, put a note in chat, please, and we will get you added to the invitation for that meeting. Rotations for the pull request queue. Just a reminder, if you have not done a PR Wrangler rotation yet and you're interested in doing so, go ahead and sign up. And the link is, the rotation is in the weekly agenda. And if you want to shadow someone before you do a rotation on your own, that's great. Just indicate when you sign up that you want to be a shadow. All right, so let's move on to our agenda. Chris, thank you so much for waiting last week to talk about new provider hosting. I'm sorry to make you wait, but now is your turn. It is all
yeah, that's no problem. So here, let me drop this link into the chat, and I can also put it into the document. As you may or may not know, there's been a move to pull all of the individual cloud providers out of the Kubernetes repository and move those into their own either independently hosted repositories, or if you meet a certain criteria as part of the Kubernetes hosted repository. And so that initial work is underway right now with repositories created for all of the cloud providers, and a working group. The cloud provider working group is coming up with standards that we expect these repositories to have in how they're organized and laid out. In part so that teams like testing and docs will be able to consume the resources from that in a sane and consistent way. And so in that pull request you see right there is kind of a first draft of the requirements that we're going to be enforcing on these repositories over the next cycle. It's going to be an ongoing work in progress because we're going to be sorting things out. And you'll see there are some comments on there that I need to make some updates onto it. But for for generating docs, we would actually like to make sure we work with the docs team, because we spoke a few weeks ago about not hosting the documentation for the individual providers inside of upstream Kubernetes anymore as well. But we would still like those docs generated and produced onto the website. And so we would like to work with the docs team on organizing that so that work can be automated, and coming up with minimum standards, like what are the documents we expect people to have, like we would assume a getting started guide, a list of configuration options, other things, so that so that and what support would you need from us in order to help you do that generation and do that work, so that it's not so that maintaining these isn't entirely on your shoulders, and rather is on the shoulders of the people who are producing the documentation. And so I don't know if I expect any answers right now, but I wanted to make sure that we started that conversation, and we were communicating back and forth.
Thank you for starting that conversation. That is, I had been wondering what the best way forward might be for different cloud provider documentation. It was the solution that I had been looking at would be to contact everyone, individual contributors who had contributed all of these docs over time, and give them a certain window to move the documentation off of the site. But I think the solution you're proposing of hosting platform or provider-specific documentation in individual repositories and automating content delivery is worth exploring. Our list is really long today. Is Andrew here? Andrew is our automation evangelist.
Well, and Steve.
Yes.
Oh, and Steve.
Definitely. So I think the way forward for the cloud provider docs conversation is going to be to have a conversation, an offline conversation with the working group and folks from docs who are interested, folks from documentation who are interested. So I will take an action to set up a meeting. Is that agreeable? Would you like to meet offline and have a more specific and more confined discussion?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so just a really quick, if you are interested in joining a conversation about isolating and automating cloud provider documentation, will you drop a link into chat or just a me too, so I know who to invite? I'm just going to make a note here in the agenda. So Chris, Joe has a question for you. Is there any sense of the expected audience?
I saw that. So from our point of view, the end user is the most important audience that we're trying to reach with these different providers. Being able to create a consistent experience for them, so that when they arrive and they want to run Kubernetes on Azure or OpenStack, that they have that they're successful at that. Like, guaranteeing their success is the most important thing. So that's what we would be looking at to start off with. But I also think it's valuable to have documentation in place that allows developers to also show up and be successful and to contribute, because a lot of times these consumers wind up turning into developers as they uncover needs. But to start off with, just using it and using it correctly is our primary target audience.
All right, cool. Thank you. Any more questions for Chris before we move on? All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Chris, thank you for your time. You're welcome to stay, but you've spent an awful lot of time in Sig Docs. So if you go, we won't feel sad.
I'll stick around.
Okay. Next up, Marcus, talking about API group naming. Take it away, Marcus.
Yes, so one of the problems I discovered is that in the reference documentation that we have, that apparently is getting auto-generated. The API group names are always a short group name, and this turns out to be problematic, especially in the case of writing RBAC, YAML files, or also networking files. So these are the two cases actually where I ran into issues with this, with networking before and with RBAC just last week, and caused us actually some trouble to debug this, as it's not always obvious. My question would be, is it just wrong that there is a short API group name in the reference documentation, or does it need to be like, or should it be the long one? So in my opinion, it kind of should be a long one, but I mean, there might be a good reason why there is a short name currently.
So I have the same question. I was hoping to get the answer to that from you, and I was thinking the answer is we probably should be displaying the long name. That the code that does that generation was developed by Phil Whitrock. He chimed in a little bit on our Slack channel just to say that he did it that way because there was the group names were weird at the beginning, is how he phrased it. But I don't have any more detail as to why he made that decision in the first place. We actually right now have a fix checked in that will produce the docs with the full group names, and I could regenerate the docs and republish them, as soon as today, and we can take a look at that and see if we like what we get. I think we'll want to tweak it a little bit for look and feel, but someone, there's actually Ki Ming who made a check-in to the reference docs generator code just yesterday. So I don't know. Does anybody else have a thought on why we would be displaying these short friendly names as opposed to the full name of the group?
I was guessing that originally it was due to the constrained size of the display window, because Phil was going for that 3-pane window effect, which on smaller devices doesn't give you a whole lot of space. But man, I'm just guessing. I don't actually have knowledge.
Well, one of the things I notice in our, now that the generation code has been revised, is that the left pane things get cut off, they get truncated. And so I was wondering if we could keep the short names in the left nav, but have the long names displayed in the main body of the content. What do people think of that?
In my opinion, that probably makes sense. The short name is useful to just find things in the navigation, while the long name is just what you need if you want to write correct files, correct specs, right?
Yeah, so maybe what we should do, just to get this fixed, we should republish the docs with the long names both places, and then we can play around with maybe using short names in the left nav after that.
That sounds good to me. That's kind of all I actually want.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I knew better why those short friendly names were there in the first place, but I don't. And as I think through it, I can't think of any good reason that we should be displaying short names when it's important to have the full name, for these reasons that you've mentioned.
Cool. So, Steve, you were going to, what I hear you saying is that you'll regenerate and republish the docs today.
Mm-hmm.
Right, awesome. Marcus, anything else?
No, that's all I have on this topic. Yeah, I think this would solve a lot of people's problems around this. And I wasn't the only one running into this last week. I thought that, yeah, it's probably an issue.
Awesome.
Yeah, okay.
Cool. Thank you for bringing it to our attention, and we're happy to help.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Cheers. All right. Next issue, cookie licking. I'm sorry, I now understand that cookie licking may not be an industry-wide term.
Nice, good. I think it's solid.
Weirdo.
Keep using it.
Okay. So in case you don't know, cookie licking is if you see a cookie that you want, you lick the cookie, put it back down, and say, you can't have that cookie. I licked it. It's mine. And it's a way of talking about claiming a poll or claiming an issue and commenting on an issue either formally or informally and saying, hey, I commented on that issue. That's mine. You can't work on that. Or discouraging other people from working on it. And what's happening is that there's a lot of cookie licking happening with issues that are tagged good first issue, and it's inhibiting folks from working on it. So I would like to formally propose that we have a no cookie licking policy that this would look like formally is that if someone comments on an issue, if there is not an active pull request on that issue in less than a week, it's fair game for everyone, or a week max. If you comment on an issue, you have 1 week maximum to get a pull request open and actively worked on. Otherwise, that issue is fair game. Good first issues are unsurprisingly popular ones, and want to make sure that they keep available and keep in circulation rather than going stale. So. Is anyone super pro cookie licking? Is this controversial in any way? Saxo, thanks, Joe. You're totally normal yourself.
So this is bad. I'm definitely not the pro cookie licking. Germaphobes go nuts with that. But so I know what had happened before. You know, we had done some doc sprints where by accident 2 different folks had picked the same glossary item, and so. Okay, thanks, Joe. That's awesome. And so, you know, what happened there wasn't the worst thing in the world. I felt bad. I had to tell one person, hey, I'm really sorry, but this other pull request is really pretty much good to go, and yours had some problems, and I had to make a decision. They both were trying to do the glossary entry. And it wasn't the worst thing in the world, right? I mean, it wasn't the worst thing in the world. You know, they all learned a lot. Maybe they wish they wouldn't have had overlapping work, but even the whole week, should we make it just a couple days or something? I hate to like slow things down even a week because of something like that. In some ways, I don't know. I just want to throw that out there.
No, Brett, I totally agree, especially when we're in like doc sprints and sport. I think a week is going to be way too long. We want to be able to give people capability of grabbing things and running with them quicker.
Sure.
Yeah, I think doc sprints are kind of a corner case. So I think for a doc sprint, we would likely tag a bunch of issues and say, these are for a doc sprint, please don't claim them. And then within the doc sprint, I think it's useful to have like a separate tracking mechanism, like a spreadsheet or something like that. Mm-hmm. Comments kind of work, but I think it's because even within the doc sprint itself, I have had 2 people claim the same issue, and they're in the same room sitting across the street.
That's what I had.
Yeah.
So I think it's useful just to like have a spreadsheet, claim stuff on the spreadsheet first. But are we saying like 1 week is too long for just in general? We should like do 3 days or
yeah.
Okay.
That's awesome.
But
my own preference would be for a shorter window. I would like to consider 3 days rather than 1 week.
And what do they do? They just comment on the issue? Is that how they claim it? Say, hey, I'm going to give this a whirl?
Well, comment and then hopefully open a PR within 3 days.
Yeah, absolutely.
The goal is to get those moving into PRs quickly.
Right. I think that's fair. I mean, if you can't get the PR open in 3 days.
It is to open a PR. I'd like to see that.
Sure. So let's say 3 days then. Is that agreeable?
Can I ask a question about what an active PR means? Is it okay for somebody to start working on a PR and say it's not ready for review yet? I'm still working on it, but here's my work so far. Is that considered active, or does active mean it's like ready to review?
That's a really good question. How do we want to define active? How much how much time do we want to allow a PR to sit with like a work in progress? Do we want to say 3 days? Do we want to say a week? How much?
I've worked with projects before where the person actually put WIP in the description while it was work in progress, and then when they took the WIP off, then people knew that it was ready for review.
Yeah, that's how we do it here. Like they usually put it in the title, and then the automation will automatically add the tag like holds and work in progress. And then when you remove it from the title, then people know they can review it.
Sure.
That sounds pretty lightweight.
It is pretty lightweight. I will also say that I am a chief offender in that I have at least one PR that I can think of that has been work in progress for at least 3 months. Maybe I'm a corner case. I'm just that guy. In cases like me, how do we want to handle a PR that's been open for a while?
We'll stick the Fettia bot on you.
All right.
Sometimes it just takes a long time to do the work. Like maybe there's a difference between something that's been work in progress with no action on it for a while versus something that actually, like Zach, maybe your PR really is just taking you a long time, but you're still working on it.
Sure.
I don't see a problem there. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, I mean, Misty, I think you're right. I think that we don't need to dive too deeply into like putting a time limit on works in progress.
Like you can't do the no cookie licking thing and also say things can't sit in work in progress. Like doing both of those things at once seems to be, it puts people in a catch-22.
It is both confusing and draconian, yes.
Yeah.
So, sure. Let's take that with get a PR open within 3 days. Works in progress can be works in progress. If someone else, if someone is also interested on working something, they can contact the person with an open PR and work it out between them. Is that agreeable? Is that sufficiently specific to address the majority of use cases?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Let's see. Moving on. Okay, I'm noticing we're about halfway done, and we are just getting to the really dense stuff. So I may start to moderate more actively just to keep us on track. So we had a request from Dan Kahn, the CEO for the CNCF. Apparently, the Kubernetes website is having long load times in China because the fonts for the Kubernetes website are being served from a Google font server. And the Great Firewall tends to slow things down significantly. So we have a request to find an alternate means of serving fonts for the Kubernetes website. After looking into it, I don't know that finding another font server is necessarily the way to go. Does anybody have experience with this kind of challenge? Has anyone had to deal with this before?
No, but if they're just the font files, why can't we just serve them from Kubernetes.io?
I think that may be the solution. I think that just putting them on the site and serving them that way seems like the way to go.
It would be even better behavior to have a fallback font that people are likely to have locally on their system.
Yeah.
Do we have to have like some fancy font that nobody has locally for the Chinese glyphs, or is this English in the English docs in China?
It's the English docs.
It's got to be English docs because the translation stuff's not up yet.
So
do we just fall back to something normal, like Arial?
Right.
Arial for all.
That sounds totally reasonable to me. Okay, so I will open an issue for that, and let's get fonts embedded. Arial for all. All right. Let's see. Considering, so there's been some discussion over the past several weeks. Initially, we'd seen an automation proposal for a spell checker, and in the past couple of weeks, we've had discussion about a linter and a link checker. So I think it's worth discussing, especially the link checker. I think that might be worth considering as an addition to our CI/CD. We are moving around a lot of content, and as Raji pointed out, and thank you, Raji, for opening that the issue in a subsequent PR, pointing out just how many broken links that we have and that get created when we move things around. Adding a link checker may help us be more conscious and avoid 404s on the site for moving content around. How do folks think, or what do folks think about adding a link checker to our CI/CD? Andrew, do you have thoughts on that?
Yes, I would like that, because then we don't have to do our monthly maintenance where we check it.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good idea.
You're going to run into edge cases where you're adding links that your PR is creating links that you're then linking to in the same PR, so the link checker will fail because, well, maybe it won't fail because the link will be in the PR, but like this is a chicken and egg problem I've seen in the past where you're adding new endpoints and then linking to them.
Can you do the check after the build is done?
Yeah, that you'd have to do it that way.
Yeah.
That was how we solved it at GitHub as well, was building first and then running the link checker. But even
what
then,
link checker did you guys use, or did you have to write your own? Because I've done that about 5 times.
honestly, I couldn't tell you. But that is a great question. Does anybody have experience with a link checker that they like and think would work super well for us?
I suggest Zeno. Zeno, yeah, that's been working very well. I've been using it for over a year or so. So it not only gives you the broken link, it also points you to the pages and the relevant pages that are pointing to this link. So you'd get a consolidated report.
That's nice. Have you used it in a CI/CD stack, Raji?
No, I'm afraid not.
Okay.
I've used Linklint in the past. It's a little bit slow. It's probably too slow for CI/CD. It's super thorough. I think one of the things that you have to do is decide, you have to balance out thoroughness with time constraints, because it actually takes a long time to validate web links, and you also sometimes have issues with looking like you're doing denial of service. So sometimes you have to add artificial delays and timeouts so you don't get blocked by somebody. Like, it's kind of a voodoo thing.
Right. Can we pull it out? So, because you know how like we run, like the checks separately, like, there's the Netlify one and the, can't think right now. Like in GitHub in the PRs, like it shows the different checks separately.
Sure.
Like, is there a way to do a link checker that does that? And so it can kind of run on its own speed, and like, we just have to make sure that it's okay before we submit the PR, but it doesn't block like the rest of the testing.
That would be my hope, is that we could add it, as a separate test to the stack that runs separately.
Yeah, like Travis and the other checks and the CLA checks. Because if we had like a fifth one that was like link checking, and then it wouldn't block the rest of it.
Sure. I mean, ideally that would be the goal. I'm seeing feedback from Joe. Yeah, the timing is really good on this, but Joe is saying that he'd like to see it on the while writing side, and that Joe is less inclined to put it on CI/CD since things will be breaking constantly and suddenly. Sure, I understand the reluctance, Joe, to put it on a CI/CD side, but I mean, ultimately, like, what are we gate checking against? Because right now there's not really any gate checking that's happening, and I feel like we're seeing enough broken links that having a link checker serve as a gate test for PRs would be really valuable.
I'm on the fence about this. I'm on the fence between doing it that way and having the link test run automatically once a day and generating a report for us. And I guess if it turns out that it adds a lot of time to being able to, when you, let's see, how does this work? You submit a PR and it kicks off, the Travis build and the Netlify. If this adds too much time to that, I guess I would argue in favor of let's get a daily report. But I could see this working as a, continuously if we can once get them all cleaned up. And that would be a big effort right there.
Yeah.
So another thing to think about is if you have a link checker running on every PR, it should only be checking new links that get added.
Yeah.
But at the same time, your PR may be breaking a link that your PR doesn't realize it's breaking. So you probably need the per PR checks for new things, but you probably also need a periodic overall website check. Checking, like crawling the whole website for links takes a really long time, and that's where you start having problems with another website being down or blocking link checkers or you looking like denial of service. The other thing you can choose is to only validate internal links, not external links. I don't know, it sort of depends on the pattern. I mean, I'm too new to the doc set to have an opinion.
No, that's validating external links. Often, my experience with that is that you get all kinds of HTTP errors depending on what's going on with the provider, and you can get a failing gate check for an unrelated external reason. And if we use a link checker as a gate check function, I don't want to slow down anything happening because it's like this. The site is HTTP 500, for example. So like an internal link checker, I think, is a really good idea. Or confining link checks to internal links is a really good idea.
Yeah, I had misunderstood the original proposal. I mean, now that I understand that this would just be checking links introduced by the PR, then I think it's fine to have that as part of the CI/CD.
Okay. Well, let's look into it more. Misty, thank you for the reference for linklint, and Raji, thank you for the reference to Xenu. Let's start there and see what we can discover about the CI/CD worthiness of these as tools, and whether anyone out on the intertubes has experience with these things. And let's revisit this. Let's revisit this again next week, and review initial findings. But from what I'm hearing, it sounds like folks are thumbs up in general for a CI/CD link checker that validates links introduced or removed by a PR. Am I correctly hearing that? Yes. Excellent. Okay. All right. Let's do research and review in a week.
Zach, what I wanted to bring more was in terms of guidelines for actually the referencing text and the topics that you would be renaming or deleting. If we could have clear guidelines on that, that would itself reduce a lot of, broken links.
Say more, Raji.
When you're documenting something, and if you're referencing to a text or a topic in a different page, you'd rather use this exact section name than using a custom name to reference it. So if there is a broken link and if you're planning to fix it, you wouldn't know what was initially referring to, right? So unless you have clear guidelines about what was the section or the topic that it was referring to.
So I'm having trouble visualizing. It would be, can you?
Some of them usually, if the topic, if they were referring to a kubectl overview section and referring to that as just kubectl in their text, the referencing text was just kubectl. That would, and if it was broken because kubectl overview was renamed to just say overview, or that didn't work correctly, and if the link broke. So unless we have some guidelines about what should be the referencing text that you need to add when you're referencing, and what should be the guideline when you're renaming.
I see. So including anchor text that making anchor text match the section.
Yes, yeah, right. That's what I was referring to, because in some places we are referring them as we are referring it as dashboard, and some places we are referring it as web UI. There is no consistency, so you would not know. I mean, at least for newcomers like me, I found it a little difficult to actually understand what was the topic it was referring to. And also, as a user, you should be, you just clicked on kubectl and you're expecting to see a section that reads kubectl. And if it just pops up as overview, there is no affirmation that you clicked on you are on the right section, right?
That seems reasonable and fair. Do other folks have input or thoughts or response?
Yeah, I think there could be some standards and style, like something additional to our style guide where we give guidance on like best practices for naming links, things like that. I feel like setting those standards is, I think they're two separate conversations, where it's like standards for better content and better guidance and better UX and like branding guidelines and sort of agreed upon terms and practices and for how we set anchors and set links and name things. And then there's the how do we give some automated guidance to people through tooling to create better PRs. So I think there's like I think there's two conversations that are happening here.
Yes, it's twofold, yeah.
I just think it's two separate things that we should definitely consider to address this particular problem.
Right, yes,
so,
they're twofolds.
Raji, would you be willing to open a PR with your suggested changes or what you'd like to see implemented in the style guidelines?
Sure, I'll do that.
Excellent, thank you. All right. Moving on from CI/CD improvements, just an update to folks. We got this morning a proposal to, or a request from a Korean translation team who wants to begin working on a Korean translation. So, yay, we're growing. And this is, makes me really glad that we're thinking about Hugo and easier internationalization.
Yeah, can we figure out the Chinese translation process first?
Yes, I think that's really important to do.
Hey. Great. Okay.
Before we start telling people, giving people instructions based on a stack we have not experienced yet ourselves. That seems totally legit. All right, I see a new item for the Sig Docs contributor process. So, yeah, Jared and I talked a little about this yesterday. I think this is wonderful. Jared, Andrew, take it away.
Andrew,
yeah, so go ahead.
Nope, it's all you, Andrew.
Okay, yeah, so we realized that it wasn't clear in the documentation, like the exact process for becoming like a Sig Docs maintainer, because a lot of documentation we have is for the general like community membership and that sort of thing. So we would like to sort of add that to the Docs contributor documentation and clean that up. And also, I think, let's see, reorganize the contributor section in our site to make it easier for people to find, like, kind of like, depending on where they are in the process, you know, find the proper instructions for that. Yeah.
I think
and then
yep. Yeah, I think there's two parts of this. One is the contributor guidelines that Andrew mentioned, and the other is writing the actual contributor guidelines, setting those standards. And then the other part is sort of reorganizing what's currently in the docs when it comes to contributing to the content. Because there's kind of we smashed a bunch of content like Jekyll includes and like really advanced topics in that section that are completely irrelevant to a new user and new contributor. And then there's really clear guidance around how to file a PR and what to do. So I think it's important to separate those two out. And so I think there's two parts of this.
Jared, I don't know what you're talking about with the smashed Jekyll advanced stuff. Can you point me to that?
Yep, one second. Zach, you're not presenting. If you go to the link in the Sig Docs meeting notes, there's a link to kate.io/docs/home/contribute/participating. So if you open up that link, and no fault of anybody who created this page, but I would expect this page to be, how do I join the Sig Docs group? How do I understand what to do in the Sig Docs group? How do I become a part of the Sig Docs group? And none of that content is actually in this document. So one, this content needs to get written, or it should be renamed, and then a separate doc needs to get created that actually outlines what you expect to be in this document. Because this doesn't really outline anything that you can participate in. And then the other thing is that if you look at the left nav in this document, and maybe I can present because I think that would make things a lot easier. So, share screen. Here we go. So if you look at the screen in this left nav, you have supported doc versions. You have this big bucket that says contributing to the Kubernetes doc. And then under this bucket, you have contributing to the Kubernetes docs, which is really just a page about editing a single doc. You have participating in Sig Docs, which, as I said earlier, is not particularly useful based on the title. And then you have things that you probably might want to know about document pull requests, writing a new topic. And then underneath that, you also have things that really only pertain to this particular group. Like reviewing documentation issues is only something that a member of the org and the Sig Docs group could actually do. So it really shouldn't be here. It might need to be in another bucket that's buried down a level. Same with custom Jekyll include snippets, which is going to be irrelevant in a couple weeks when we migrate. And then localizing Kubernetes documentation, also a pretty highly specialized topic. So we're not giving good guidance to new contributors who want to contribute to our content. This is something that Misty's pointed out, and Tom have both pointed out as their new users trying to test out the content and trying to contribute, and they're really struggling to get involved, and it's a good point.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to have a separate bucket for the more advanced stuff.
And to add more specific guidelines for how to join the Kubernetes org, how to become like a Sig Docs maintainer, having that information be included in the contributing section. And
just to be clear, the participation section that I linked to, it's useful information because it's like who has right access to what. And that information is definitely useful, but it's definitely more of an advanced topic. How to participate should be a separate document. That's more about how to get involved. That's what you're saying.
So my memory of the how to participate topic is that it's mostly about how to review PRs. And so we could maybe combine that with the one on reviewing issues. You know, we could have a topic called something like reviewing PRs and issues. and then a different one called, you know, something about being in Sig Docs. How, you know, how do you join and where the meeting is, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's exactly what you're saying, Steve. There may be a bucket of Sig Docs processes that relate specifically to what we do here and sort of how we coordinate, and then a separate bucket of how to actually get started and get involved and participate, sort of at an entry level for new contributors.
So yes, I think that falls into two contribution buckets as well. I think so, like Misty and Tom, I'm not your boss, I can't assign you anything, but this would be a really awesome opportunity to write up that journey because you are seeing it with fresh eyes, specifically the how to join the Kate's org and how to become a Sig Docs maintainer. That's like joining the Kate's org is pretty researchable. The Sig Docs maintainer, you would probably have to like interview folks and talk with them. A really good opportunity. I think you would be the appropriate people to like take that on. But then the reorganizing the content of that entire section, I think is, I think you would become very frustrated very quickly. And I reference my own long existing work in progress because I tried to tackle that when I was new, and that's why that PR is still WIP low these months later. So I am happy to close my PR in favor of someone else who wants to tackle this work, because I will be honest, I cannot do it. I cannot, with KubeCon EU, write the docs, and the summit coming up at the end of the month. I can't take on anything new right now. So if someone wants to take on reorganizing the contributor section, this would be a golden opportunity to do it, because I agree with Jared. It's really important to have this be very high quality and be as explanatory and as helpful as possible and as soon as possible.
It seems like the right way to work on this is to get a couple of newbies to collaborate with somebody who's totally not a newbie, who really understands the process. Because if you have newbies trying to write what the process is, that it's like we don't know what the process is. That's the whole point. So like it would be like a lot of research, or it would be us having people we could just ask and then we could kind of write down what they say. Like I guess it's the kind of thing about when you have to read the code versus talk to the engineer who wrote the code.
So Misty, there was a comment from Joe Heck, who is, I think, Joe, are you volunteering to work with Misty on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I've got limited bandwidth, so I keep dropping out. Yeah, please let me know how I can help. Would love to. And
it looks like Raji is volunteering as well. So Misty, Joe, and Raji, that seems, and Steve.
Yeah, because I was heavily involved in getting that existing content in place, so I'd be a good reference.
Awesome. Okay, so Steve and Joe as and Steve, Joe, Misty, and Raji for tackling the contributor section.
Yeah, and I'll also work with Misty. I'm really good at being a village idiot and then documenting my experience as village idiot. So whatever I can do to help out, I think sounds like a fun idea.
Awesome. Excellent. Good. Thank you all for taking this on. I think I think this work will make a huge difference. It'll have a very high impact in a very short time. All right, let me just make sure that we have. Okay, I'm just gonna see. Joe, Steve, Raji, Misty, Tom. Tom, is it okay if I don't want to fumble over Tom Van Wardhuizen in notes? Can I just call you Tall Tom in the notes?
Yes, that's why that moniker exists.
Thank you. All right, we have a couple of minutes left. Is there anything that folks want to bring up? Anything to discuss before we call it?
Hey, it's Paris.
Ooh, wow.
Go ahead, Paris.
I was just going to say, not to get ahead of ourselves on the contributing stuff, but love to have like a link to this eventually on the new contributor site, as well as the single point of truth contributor guide that's housed in the community repo as well. It just lets other folks know that there's a different way to contribute to Docs. That would be cool. That's all I wanted to say.
Yay. Docs going to be a good place for people to get started. And
yeah. And as we have been doing more and more contribute to Kubernetes talks at conferences, I think one of the areas that we've been highlighting is Docs as a best single point of entry into the project. So yeah, cool.
Very cool. And thank you, Paris. That's a really good point. It would be nice to have that as an authoritative point of entry for the community in general. Okay, cool.
Misty and Tom, are you both on Slack? Can you reach out to me, HackJ, on Slack so that I can pull something together and help coordinate this?
All right. If there is nothing else, Nick, what have you got for us?
I'm just waving.
Are you just waving goodbye? Okay. So
Bye.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's a SIG meeting. Thanks, everybody. Good discussion today.
Bye, y'all.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.